Welcome back. This may be the busiest the board has been in a little while, but all of it kind of falls on the crux of A$AP Rocky finally announcing Don't Be Dumb is releasing. I believe it's August 30th of this year. So we finally have a release date for that. And it got me thinking about a bunch of other albums that we waited on that either lived up to expectations, that did not live to expectations, albums that will probably never release. And then we will get to the two albums here that kind of are the main crux of why I wanted to make this video. But let's start off with the albums that did live up to their anticipation and their long, long wait times. So obviously, Astroworld. It took 1,820 days, released in 2018. And there was quite a bit of anticipation with this album, and there was a lot of kind of build up to an album with obviously the Astroworld accidents that occurred there. Everything got scrapped and probably got delayed. And then we finally, just last year, received Utopia. And while that wait gap was quite a long time, the wait was totally worth it. It was an amazing, dynamic experience. We saw Travis really experiment, kind of get more onto the boards of production. The album seemed a little bit more darker, a little bit more of a wilder experience, and overall, the guest features provided some good performances. And there's some high top tier Travis songs on here, particularly Telekinesis as an example. Sirens I've grown to really love, and Lost Forever is another one that I've been going back to still quite frequently. Does the album still have some flaws? Yes, I believe Circus Maximus may be one of his worst songs, but still, overall, for this album to take as long as it did, it still lived up to the anticipation that it built on itself. Another one I wanted to talk about was The Sun's Tirade, which I believe either released in 2015, but I believe is in 2016. It took 1,792 days to receive The House is Burning. And that Sun's Tirade is one of the best and most underrated albums of the decade. And it honestly took me a long time to realize that. I thought for a good little while that the album was a little bit sleepy and nothing really caught my attention, but with age and with time, I've really grown to appreciate that album's sound. And that 2015 to 2017 era of TDE is honestly completely unmatched. And The House is Burning just kind of continued that, but you did get a little bit more of a fun kind of energy with The House is Burning. You still get those kind of fun and also kind of those more kind of relaxed moments like R.I.P. Young. You also get the one, I'm trying to think, it's Score. Yeah, Score is the one that I really enjoy there too. And Dark Side is an intro. There's some of these songs that do fall into that syrupy, that smooth kind of Isaiah Rashad sound that we know of him for. But there's still a good amount of bangers on here too, and it does show a good amount of diversity. And I know Isaiah Rashad said that he wants to be more consistent after this album drops, so I'm really hoping for that because Isaiah Rashad and Schoolboy Q, SZA as well, are kind of bringing around this second kind of wind for TDE, which has had a little bit of a dark days for the past couple of years. And another one I wanted to bring up, it's a little bit more, not low key per se, but I don't think a lot of people talk about it. Process from Sampha, which came out in 2017, and that was 2,450 days up until Lahai. Process is an amazing minimal album that provides some amazing vocal performances and more of an electronic album that did bring a little bit of, not really dance, but kind of more groovier sounds. But with Lahai, something felt a little bit more organic, a little bit more earthy, a little bit more personal with Lahai. With it being 2,450 days, it kind of almost fell into the Shadow Realm territory where we were thinking we weren't even going to get this album. But when we did, it did really live up to its anticipation and probably one of the best albums of the 2020s so far, alongside with Utopia. So I could name off so many more. I could name off Crash to Blue Lips. I could name off Damn to Mr. Morale. There's so many that you could really encapsulate into living up to expectations. We don't want to be here for ages though. But let's talk about the other side where the albums take a little while to drop, but they don't really live up to the expectations. Now, these wait times are not nearly as long, and mostly because I feel kind of the latter portion of the 2010s did bring some more disappointing albums of note. Not to mention, too, that's when I was starting to get heavily invested into rap and kind of wanting to talk about it. So please excuse me for being antisocial. Amazing trap record. I have it on vinyl. I still play it to this day. That lightning in a bottle that Roddy Ricch got on that album with these amazing hooks, some really catchy production, and kind of some more heartfelt and sincere moments, especially towards the end with War Baby, did provide a really bright future for Roddy Ricch. And a lot of people were anticipating the follow up. And when Live Life Fast dropped, it took 742 days to drop, which is kind of around 2 to 3 years, which is kind of what I used to think was the typical wait cycle for an album, but that has accelerated tremendously. But with Live Life Fast, the energy, the charisma, the singing performances even just were not up to snuff. Something really fell off the tracks here. Not to mention he mentioned this album was a no skip policy when a lot of it may be an all skip policy if we're going to be honest. But this is an example of just waiting too long and maybe either you lose the plot or maybe it's an attempt at something different and it really just didn't stick. I just don't know if, please excuse me if you're being antisocial and Live Life Fast, there wasn't a massive tonal shift because it does sound like the same artist, but he's using his talents to an incorrect way to where it just doesn't sound as good as it used to be. So then we get to The Lost Boy, which took 903 days to drop From a Bird's Eye View. Now, From a Bird's Eye View is not an absolutely terrible album. The problem is, though, is that it's an absolutely mediocre album. And with The Lost Boy, it's another example of what Please Excuse Me had, where you did get a very good sample piece of what Corday was, what he brought to the table, what his sound was like, and you did get those personal moments alongside some catchy songs and some bangers. I can think of RMP as an example. Broke as Fuck is another one. There's some really great songs on there. But then we get to The Bird's Eye View, which did see some more kind of mainstream attempts. I could think of the song with Gunna. I could think of the song with Lil Durk. There's some songs on here that really just did not stick as much. While they aren't terrible songs, it doesn't really carry the sound and kind of what the idea or what my idea of Corday was as an artist. From a Bird's Eye View is not a complete abandonment of that, but it felt like it was something that just really didn't work in his favor and something, again, that just kind of felt a little bit safe. And that's a really hard thing to toe the line of is that you wait so long for an album. Do you want to change the sound up so much where you may alienate your fans, or do you want to stick to the same and people call the album safe? It's a really tough circumstance. But let's get to probably the biggest one that I know of. And that's so Coloring Book came out in 2016, and it was 1,169 days to the big day. Coloring Book around the time of 2016 was an amazing summer experience. I remember I was working as a landscaper and working on the lawnmower. I was able to have my music on for multiple hours at a time. I remember playing this album like 3 or 4 times in a row. It is a perfect summer album, a driving album as well. And while some parts of it may have not aged as well, I think Coloring Book is still an amazing, vibrant, and really just heartwarming experience because Chance really has this way of bringing this kind of heartwarming and kind of just fun and just kind of wholesome experience to an album. The Big Day, on the other hand, I really don't know what to describe what happens. The big thing for me, and of course I've done a cozy stream on this, I've listened to this album on stream before, but the big thing with The Big Day is that Chance the Rapper used his vocals in a very awful way. He really brought his vocals to an extreme to the point where they just got ear grating and tedious to listen to. And with Chance's vocal performances, it really is towing that line. Either it cannot go far enough or it goes too far. And with this album, there are so many examples where the vocal performances go too far. The production is a little bit more just kind of lackluster, but I think the big problem is the vocal performances as well as the actual writing. The writing of this album is notoriously and well known to be absolutely garbage, and I'm not going to spew out all the lines that I can think of for the big day. But these were albums that did take a long time, but they just didn't live up to the hype. And while it didn't take nearly as long as some other albums that showed up here, when you build up anticipation for waiting so long, it really does set you up sometimes for disappointment. You can wait for a good long time, and when you wait so long, people anticipate something drastic, something major, something absolutely like crazy in expectation sometimes. We'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about some albums that are what I call in the shadow realm. They probably will never release. So let's start off obviously with Blonde from Frank Ocean. And it's been 2,868 days since Blonde dropped. Of course, there was a couple of singles like DHL, In My Room. There's a couple other singles there as well that I'm probably missing out on. But this is going to kind of play into a theme that if you take the time to craft an incredible experience, an incredible album, something that feels timeless no matter how much you play it, you can wait this long. And sometimes you can just retire on an album. If you take the time, if you take the dedication, and you take the crafts very seriously, if you want to put it into one album, sometimes you can wait for as long as you need to drop an album. That's kind of where Sampha kind of fell into as well, is that Process was an incredible album, and people were waiting on it, but people kind of gave the benefit of the doubt because it's just like, you gave us such an amazing album to start off with. We're fine for waiting because I know we'll get something really good down the line. Another one is Lauryn Hill. Now, she announced that I think she was working on an album. I'm going to take that with a grain of salt, and if that drops, I will be very happy, and I will be very happy to call this video old. But it has been 9,434 days since the miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Another example, though, where this album is a classic, it's timeless. Lauryn Hill has already been established as one of the best female MCs and one of the best MCs, period, of all time. And not to mention, this album has lived on through samples, through interpolations from covers. This album is still has quite a good life onto it, and being reintroduced to so many generations of people. You can wait as long as you want. Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was number one on the album or the Apple Top 100 list. While I don't think that's the best spot for it, in the top 10, 100%. So I totally agree that this is fine to wait this long. And Rihanna, 3,069 days. And she also announced that she's working on the album. I am not going to put any stock into that. But Anti, when that released, it had a chokehold on the radio. And it was a very different sound for Rihanna at the time, at least for me, that sounded so much darker, that sounded a little bit more hip-hop inspired, and that's what I really gravitated towards. I have it on vinyl as well, and when Rihanna comes back, if she does drop an album, I'm heavily waiting in anticipation for it. But if Anti is the last album, I think, honestly, to leave off on Anti is a really good kind of album to leave off of, because you have some amazing singles that came off of that album that still live on to this day, and you have some incredible deep cuts. So, albums that live up to the hype, albums that did not, albums in the shadow realm. Now let's talk about the albums that we're waiting on. So, A$AP Rocky with Don't Be Dumb. So when August 30th, 2024 comes around, it will be 2,289 days until when that album, between Testing and Don't Be Dumb. So A$AP Rocky has dropped quite a few singles in between this time. There was, I think, Babushka Boy came out after Testing. You also had Same Problems. You also had DMB. You also had Shit in Me once, that one as well. So there has been quite a bit of like starts and stops. Like this is leading up to an album. No, it's not. I remember there was a tweet from like 3 or 4 years ago saying the album was 95% done. And we haven't heard anything since, but until now. So this kind of plays into what I was talking about here, is that when you tease your fans of releasing singles and saying it's like, oh, the album is 95% done, The album's almost ready. The album's being mastered. The album I just handed into streaming services. When you keep baiting your fans back and forth, it does two things. One, it creates such crazy expectations for the album that they may not be able to be met, or it can create a situation where your fans get really annoyed and they won't jump ship per se, but they won't have as nearly as much excitement as they should. But Don't Be Dumb, he released the producer list, which looks insane. I am so excited to finally see this album come into fruition. I'm just really hoping it lives up to expectations because honestly, Testing is my favorite Rocky album, especially with Time. It's one of my favorite Rocky albums. I love how experimental it was. I love how just off the wall crazy it is. I love actually the mixing of the album because the bass sounds so just dense and so deep and so hard. I love the bass and the way that album sounds. So I'm excited for Don't Be Dumb, and I'm really hoping it doesn't fall below my expectations, and that honestly could happen, and it would be quite sad. But the one that I'm frustrated about the most is Playboi Carti with Music, I Am Music, whatever this album is called. It's only been 1,276 days. So it's not terribly long. It kind of falls into the category of the albums that didn't live up to the hype. But the Playboi Carti has put himself into the second side effect of waiting so long that I just talked about. I am getting so incredibly frustrated waiting for this album, waiting for any singles, waiting for any kind of announcement, because Playboi Carti is so mysterious for no reason. Whether it's part of his aesthetic, whether it's to generate buzz and attention, which it does do that. But this just makes me so incredibly frustrated. We had a whole bunch of singles going off into 2024. 2024, the single, great song. Hood by Air, amazing song. The other couple of singles I wasn't really a huge fan of. Different Day was pretty decent though. But then all of a sudden, Playboi Carti just goes off the map. But I remember tweets saying it's just like, it's 2024, I'm ready. And then when people, I think it was around this week actually, DJ Academics talked to Playboi Carti and she's like, oh yeah, I know, it's time. You've said this now twice, and we now only have Instagram singles. We can't even stream the songs without them being on YouTube. It's just a mess to wait for. And of course, Whole Lotta Red was a major, major shift for the rage trap sound for trap in general. But it's been so long that we need some new music to kind of play around with. We can't just keep cycling through Whole Lotta Red, especially trap is such a very fast moving genre. A lot of times you really have to keep the audience fed to keep them interested. And with Whole Lotta Red, while I've grown to like that album, I can't just keep listening to Whole Lotta Red for like another 2 or 3 years. We're waiting for an album. And it's just the constant just saying, it's like, oh yeah, the album is, it's ready. I'm ready to drop. Here's some singles. Never mind, I'm not going to drop anything. There's the show ups on streams where he shows up for 2 minutes and then he never, then he doesn't do anything and leaves. I remember actually too, I was at Metro in Montreal, and I was going to see Playboi Carti headline. All of a sudden, he canceled, and I got 50 Cent instead. Decent performance for the first 30 minutes until he had Get Rich or Die Trying just ran dry. But this has basically become a rant at this point, is that sometimes you wait too long for an album to drop, or you wait too long to drop music, and you get people like me that just get very frustrated. And also, not to mention, the expectations of this album may be absolutely astronomical, and I don't know if you can top it. We'll see, though. I'm hoping. I always hope for the best, but that's kind of why I made this video here, and also Don't Be Dumb as well. And I just think that, in general, waiting for albums has gotten, the attention span of the general audience has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. I think of Destroy Lonely. I think of Ken Carson as an example. I think of Yeet as an example, where You used to be able to wait 2 years to drop an album. That's dropped down from like 6 months to a year in order to get albums out. And sure, you do feed your fans more frequently, but the quality of the records suffer. So a lot of people, especially now if you're waiting for this long, people either are really anticipating this album or they may jump ship and not care. Now, obviously, I'm excited for all these albums dropping. Any album that's announced, of course, I'm excited when you actually get official release dates. But as a casual hip hop fan myself, it's getting very tiring to keep hearing. It's just like it's dropping, it's mastered, it's good to go, and we still wait for years to drop. So, just kind of wanted to make a video on waiting for albums to drop and just the album rollout experience in general. But let me know your thoughts. What was a long rollout that lived up to the hype? Which one was one that didn't? And is there an album that you're looking forward to this year and the next couple of years that you're really excited for? So thank you very much for giving me the time to rant about primarily Playboi Carti. And I will talk to you again very soon.